My name is Madison Hayes, and at 32, I never imagined I'd be hiding in my car outside my parents' home on Thanksgiving, watching police cruisers roll up the driveway. The turkey was barely out of the oven when Officer Reynolds knocked, warrant in hand. My brother Tyler's face drained of color. My sister-in-law Jessica clutched their baby protectively. My mother froze mid-prayer, and my father, the man who taught me about integrity, stared at me with betrayal in his eyes as if I was the criminal. Nobody expected me to discover the forgery, much less do anything about it. Family loyalty was supposed to trump everything, even grand theft auto. I still remember the shock on their faces that day. If you've ever had to stand up to your family, you know exactly how gut-wrenching it feels. I'd love to hear where you're watching from today, and if you've ever had to make a tough choice between family loyalty and self-respect. Hit that like button if you've ever had to set a difficult boundary with family, and subscribe to follow my journey from doormat to someone who finally learned that real family doesn't steal from you. Let me take you back to where this all began. Growing up in the Hayes family meant understanding your role early. For my parents, Robert and Diana Hayes, image was everything. Our colonial-style house in Fairview Heights was always immaculate when guests came over. Mom's garden club friends never suspected that behind the fresh paint and manicured lawn, we were constantly one missed payment away from disaster. I was the younger child, the reliable one. Tyler, my brother, 4 years older and infinitely more charming, was the golden child. When we were kids, if something broke, it was assumed I did it. If money went missing from Mom's purse, I was questioned first. Not because I was mischievous, but because Tyler was so convincing when he denied everything. Madison has always been jealous of your brother, my mother would say. Not to me directly, but loudly enough that I'd overhear from the next room. She acts out for attention. The irony was that I was the careful one. While Tyler blew through 3 cars before college, I saved babysitting money and worked weekends at the mall. When Tyler dropped out of business school to find himself, I doubled down on my finance degree, graduating with honors. By 32, I had built a solid career as a financial analyst at Meridian Consulting. I lived in a modest 1-bedroom apartment in the city, about 30 minutes from my parents' home. It wasn't extravagant, but it was mine. My walls were painted, the soft blue my mother had always vetoed. My furniture wasn't heirloom quality, but I'd paid for every piece myself. The Lexus IS 350 Farad Sport was my first real indulgence. After my promotion to senior analyst last spring, I finally felt secure enough to buy something just because I wanted it. The pearlescent white exterior gleamed in the sunlight. The red leather interior still had that new car smell 3 months later. I'd named her Pearl. Something I'd never admit to anyone except my best friend Kayla. "You deserve this," Kayla had said the day I drove it off the lot. "Stop looking so guilty." Guilt was the Hayes family specialization. My father had perfected the disappointed sigh that could make you feel terrible for not anticipating his unexpressed needs. My mother had elevated the martyr complex to an art form, capable of turning any conversation into a recitation of her sacrifices. And Tyler had learned from the masters. "Come on, Maddie," he'd say, using the childhood nickname I'd repeatedly asked him to drop. "What's the point of making all that money if you don't help family?" Over the years, I'd helped a lot. I'd paid the deposit on Tyler and Jessica's first apartment when they got married 4 years ago. I'd covered 3 months of my parents' mortgage when Dad was between jobs 2 years back. I'd even funded the startup costs for Tyler's business venture, Madison Marketing Consultants. Yes, he'd named it after me, claiming it was a tribute. Later, I discovered it was because using my credit score got him better terms on the business loans. Last Thanksgiving had been the turning point. Tyler had announced Jessica's pregnancy over pumpkin pie, and everyone had cried happy tears. Then, as the dishes were being cleared, he'd casually mentioned needing just a little bridge financing to expand his business. "I'll pay you back double by Christmas," he'd promised, hand on heart. I'd said no. For the first time in my adult life, I'd prioritized my needs over my family's wants. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother had excused herself to the kitchen, leaving dishes clattering in her wake. My father had given me that look, the one that said I was breaking his heart. Jessica had stared at her lap, 7 months pregnant and clearly uncomfortable. Only Tyler had kept pushing. This is what family does, Maddie. We help each other. I've helped plenty, I'd replied. And I haven't seen a penny back from the last 3 loans. That night, Kayla had taken me out for drinks after I'd left my parents' house early. It's about damn time, she'd said, clinking her glass against mine. Welcome to the world of healthy boundaries. In the months that followed, I'd stuck to my guns. I'd ignored the passive-aggressive texts from my mother about other daughters who supported their families. I'd deflected my father's hints about their 30th anniversary trip they couldn't quite afford. I'd blocked Tyler's number after his third 3 a.m. call about emergency business opportunities. Instead, I'd focused on myself. I'd started therapy with Dr. Chen, who helped me recognize the patterns of emotional manipulation I'd normalized. I'd joined a kickboxing class that Kayla swore by. I'd even gone on a few dates, though none had progressed beyond dinner. And I'd bought Pearl. The day I signed the paperwork at Lexington Motors, I'd felt a weight lift. This wasn't just a car. It was tangible proof that my life was my own. Congratulations, Miss Hayes, the salesman had said, handing me the keys. You've worked hard for this. If only I'd known how hard I'd have to keep working to keep it. The first hint that something was wrong came on a rainy Tuesday in November, just 10 days before Thanksgiving. I was in a budget meeting when my phone buzzed with an email from Lexington Motors. Thank you for your recent transaction, it read. Your satisfaction is our priority. I frowned at my screen. I hadn't had any recent transactions with the dealership. The service appointment for Pearl's first oil change wasn't for another month. During the lunch break, I called the dealership. This is Phil from customer service. The voice on the other end said cheerfully, How can I help you today? I received an email about a recent transaction, but I haven't been to the dealership since I bought my car in August. Let me pull up your account, Miss Hayes. Can I get the last 4 digits of your social? I provided the information, drumming my fingers on my desk while I waited. Ah, yes. Here we are. The ownership transfer was processed yesterday. My heart skipped a beat. Ownership transfer? What ownership transfer? For your Lexus IS 350. The paperwork came through yesterday transferring ownership to Robert Hayes. Is there a problem? The room seemed to tilt sideways. My father's name echoed in my ears. There's been a mistake, I said, my voice surprisingly steady given the circumstances. I did not authorize any transfer. Well, we have the signed paperwork right here. It was all in order. The transfer is already complete in our system and has been submitted to the DMV. I need a copy of that paperwork immediately, I said. Someone has forged my signature. Phil's cheerful tone disappeared. That's a serious allegation, Miss Hayes. It's not an allegation. It's a fact. I did not sign anything. After a tense conversation, Phil agreed to email me copies of the documents. They arrived while I was still on the phone, and I opened them with shaking hands. There it was. My signature or a reasonable facsimile on the transfer of ownership form. Next to it, my father's signature, the familiar loops and slants I'd seen on birthday cards and permission slips my entire life. My father had forged my name to steal my car. I left work early, claiming a migraine. It wasn't far from the truth. My head was pounding as I drove home, clutching the steering wheel of Pearl as if someone might try to pry it from my hands at any moment. In my apartment, I called my parents' house. My mother answered on the 4th ring. Hayes residence. Mom, is Dad there? Madison? No, he's out with Tyler. Some business thing. Are you calling about Thanksgiving? I need to know if you're bringing anyone so I can plan the seating. I'm calling about my car, Mom. The one Dad apparently thinks belongs to him now. The pause that followed told me everything I needed to know. Oh, that, she said finally, her voice dropping to the conspiratorial whisper she used when discussing neighbors' marital problems. It's just temporary, sweetie. Your father and Tyler needed it for collateral on a loan. It's a wonderful opportunity they've found. They're going to triple their investment by Christmas. The familiar refrain made my stomach clench. So they forged my signature and stole my car instead of asking me. Don't be so dramatic. They knew you'd say no after that scene you made last Thanksgiving. They're doing this for all of us. The car is still yours. They just needed your assets on paper. That's fraud, Mom. And theft. It's family, she countered, as if that explained everything. Besides, They're going to surprise you with a replacement until everything's sorted. Tyler found a great deal on a used Honda, only 100,000 miles on it. I hung up without saying goodbye, something I'd never done before. Then I went to my window and looked down at the street where Pearl should have been parked. She was gone. My first call was to the police, who took a report but seemed skeptical when I explained the perpetrators were my father and brother. The officer suggested it might be a family misunderstanding and recommended I try to work it out privately first. My second call was to Kayla, who arrived 30 minutes later with a bottle of wine and righteous indignation. "They did what?" she practically shouted after I explained the situation. "That's straight up theft, Maddie, and forgery, and probably identity fraud." My mom made it sound like I was overreacting, I said, pouring a generous glass of Pinot Noir. Like I should be thankful they're letting me have a used Honda while they use my car as collateral. Classic gaslighting, Kayla said, taking a sip of her wine. This is exactly what Dr. Chen has been helping you recognize. They violate your boundaries, then make you feel crazy for having them in the first place. Later that night, after Kayla had left, I found the loan notices. They had been delivered to my parents' address, my old address that was still linked to some of my account. My mother had been collecting and hiding them from me. The documents revealed the ugly truth. Tyler's business was underwater. The expansion he'd been pushing for was actually a desperate attempt to outrun mounting debt. And now my car, my Pearl, was being used as collateral for a high-interest loan from a company whose name sounded more like a mob front than a financial institution. I cried myself to sleep that night, but when I woke up the next morning, sadness had crystallized into resolve. This wasn't just about a car. This was about years of manipulation, of being treated like a resource rather than a person, of having my no ignored because it didn't fit with what my family wanted from me. I called in sick to work and spent the day making calls. To the DMV, to freeze any title transfers. To 3 different lawyers, finally connecting with Rachel Watson, who specialized in identity theft and fraud. To a private investigator recommended by Rachel, who could document the paper trail and locate my car. That evening, my phone lit up with a text from Tyler. "Why is the DMV calling about title transfer issues? Dad and I have everything under control. Don't worry your pretty little head about it." I didn't respond. Another text followed. "By the way, Mom wants to know if you're bringing cranberry sauce to Thanksgiving. The canned kind? Not that fancy stuff you made last year that no one ate." The casual audacity of it all made me laugh. A harsh sound in my quiet apartment. They really thought I would just show up to Thanksgiving, cranberry sauce in hand, and pretend everything was normal while my car was being used to secure their fraudulent loan. "It's not the car," I told Dr. Chen in our emergency session the next day. "It's that they didn't even consider asking me. They just took what they wanted and expected me to accept it." "And what do you want to do about it?" Dr. Chen asked, her calm voice anchoring me. "I want my car back," I said immediately. "And I want them to understand they can't treat me this way anymore." "Those are reasonable wants," she nodded. "The question is, what are you prepared to do to ensure they're met?" I thought about Thanksgiving, just 9 days away, about my mother's perfectly browned turkey and my father's ceremonial carving of it, about Tyler's inevitable toast to family first, about how, every year, we all pretended we were the perfect family for one day, sweeping the dysfunction under my mother's heirloom tablecloth. "Whatever it takes," I answered. Rachel Watson's law office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, its exterior charm belying the cutting-edge technology inside. She greeted me with a firm handshake and direct eye contact that immediately put me at ease. "Identity theft within families is unfortunately common," she said once we were seated in her office, "but that doesn't make it any less serious." "My family seems to think it's just borrowing," I replied. "The law doesn't recognize borrowing someone's identity," Rachel said. "Let's be clear about what happened here. Your father and brother forged your signature to transfer your property without consent. That's forgery and fraud at minimum. Depending on the value of your vehicle, we're potentially looking at grand theft auto as well." She outlined my options. I could pursue civil remedies, sue for the return of my property and any damages, or I could press criminal charges, which would involve the police far more directly. "Criminal charges?" I echoed, my stomach clenching at the thought of my father in handcuffs. I don't want to send my family to jail. I just want my car back and for them to stop seeing me as their personal ATM. Rachel's expression softened slightly. It's common to feel that way. But consider this. If someone who wasn't related to you stole your car using forged documents, would you hesitate to involve the authorities? She had a point. The private investigator Rachel recommended, Marcus Jenkins, confirmed 2 days later that Pearl was indeed parked in my parents' garage. He'd also documented the paper trail, the loan from Pinnacle Financial Solutions using my car as collateral, the business accounts showing Tyler's company hemorrhaging money, and even footage from the dealership security cameras showing my father and brother submitting the forged paperwork. They told the dealership you were ill and had authorized them to handle the transfer, Marcus explained, showing me still images from the footage. Your brother did most of the talking while your father signed the papers. I felt sick looking at the images. There was Tyler, smiling his most charming smile at the dealership employee. There was my father, signing his name next to the forged version of mine. They looked so casual, so comfortable in their deception. That night, I tried one last time to resolve things without legal intervention. I sent a group text to my father, mother, and Tyler. I know about the forged documents and the unauthorized transfer of my car. I know about the loan and what you're using it for. I want my car returned immediately, undamaged. This is not a request. The responses came quickly. From my mother, "Sweetie, you're blowing this way out of proportion. We're family. Come over tomorrow and we'll explain everything." From my father, "This attitude is exactly why we had to handle things this way. You've become selfish, Madison, after everything we've done for you." From Tyler, "Wow, dramatic much? It's just a car. We raised you better than this. You owe the family after all we've done for you." The familiar guilt trip slid off me like water. Dr. Chen had helped me recognize these tactics. The minimizing, the blame shifting, the appeals to family loyalty, the suggestion that I owed them for doing the basic job of parenting. My final text was brief. "Return the car by tomorrow, or I pursue all legal options." No one replied. The next day, my mother called as if nothing had happened. About Thanksgiving, she began without preamble. "I'm seating you between Aunt Mildred and Jessica. Tyler thinks it would be good for you to feel more connected to the baby. Being an aunt might help you be less focused on material things." I gripped my phone tightly. "Mom, did you get my text about the car?" "Oh, that. Your father says not to worry about it. We have it all handled. Now, about the cranberry sauce." It was clear they weren't taking me seriously. They never had. In their minds, I would eventually give in, just as I always had. I would show up to Thanksgiving with cranberry sauce, accept their vague promises about returning my car soon, and everything would go back to the pattern established since childhood. Not this time. I spent the week before Thanksgiving preparing. Rachel filed emergency motions to freeze the loan and prevent any sale or further transfer of the vehicle. Marcus documented every text, every call, building a solid case for fraud. I gave my official statement to the police, who now had enough evidence to take the case seriously. Officer Alana Reynolds, a no-nonsense woman with kind eyes, asked if I wanted to press charges. "You should know," she said gently, "that once this process starts, you can't easily stop it. Criminal charges can affect employment, housing, future loans, and family dynamics, of course." "I understand," I said, thinking of Tyler's smug face at the dealership, of my father signing next to my forged signature without hesitation, of my mother dismissing the theft as if I'd complained about borrowed Tupperware. "I want to press charges." The timing was strategic. Rachel suggested, and I agreed, that serving the warrant on Thanksgiving would send the strongest message. The police were reluctant. At first, holiday calls are never popular, but the evidence was solid, and the value of the car made it grand theft. I spent the night before Thanksgiving alone in my apartment, surrounded by the paperwork that documented my family's betrayal. The emergency motion had been granted. The police had the warrant. Everything was in place. I hadn't slept well in days. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw my father's face, imagined his expression when the police arrived. I thought about my mother, how she would blame me for ruining the holiday. I pictured Tyler, always able to talk his way out of consequences, suddenly facing ones he couldn't charm away. Part of me still wanted to call it all off. To show up tomorrow with cranberry sauce and pretend nothing had happened. To be the Madison they expected. Compliant, forgiving, a pushover. But then I remembered Pearl, sitting in their garage like a trophy. I remembered the casual way they dismissed my feelings, my boundaries, my right to my own property. I thought about Dr. Chen asking me, "What message do you send when you allow someone to violate your boundaries without consequences?" At dawn, I texted Officer Reynolds to confirm our plan. Then I drove to a spot 2 blocks from my parents' house, where I'd wait until I got the signal to approach. This would be a Thanksgiving they'd never forget. Are you still with me? This next part was the hardest moment in my entire life, but it taught me so much about standing my ground. If you've ever had to confront someone who took advantage of you, drop a comment with a heart emoji. Sometimes the most difficult confrontations lead to the most important growth. Now, let's get back to what happened when the police showed up at my family's Thanksgiving dinner. Thanksgiving morning dawned crisp and bright, the kind of picturesque fall day that belongs on greeting cards. I arrived at my parents' neighborhood at 9 a.m., 3 hours before our traditional 12 p.m. dinner. Officer Reynolds had suggested I stay away until they called me, but I needed to see this happen. I needed to witness the moment my family realized I wasn't backing down. I parked 2 streets over and walked to a coffee shop with a clear view of my parents' driveway. Through the window, I could see my mother's silver SUV and my father's blue sedan. And there, partially visible through the garage window, was the white gleam of Pearl's hood. At 9:30, I saw Tyler's Range Rover pull in. He and Jessica stepped out, Jessica balancing baby Noah on her hip. They looked like the perfect young family. Tyler in a sweater that probably cost more than he could afford. Jessica in a floral dress with her hair curled. Noah in tiny khakis and a sweater vest. The picture of middle-class success. Only I knew it was all a facade, built on stolen property and fraudulent loans. At 10:15, I walked to my parents' house. The plan was to speak with my father alone before everyone gathered for dinner, to give him one last chance to return the car without police involvement. My mother answered the door, surprise flashing across her face. "Madison, you're early." "I'm still prepping the sweet potatoes. Is Dad here?" "I need to talk to him." "In his study," she said, gesturing vaguely before hurrying back to the kitchen. My father's study had always been off limits when we were children. Even now, I knocked tentatively before entering. He looked up from his desk, reading glasses perched on his nose. "Madison, what are you doing here so early?" "We need to talk about the car, Dad." He removed his glasses, sighing as if I was a petulant child. "I thought your mother explained this to you. It's just a temporary arrangement." "You forged my signature and took my property," I said, struggling to keep my voice level. "That's not a temporary arrangement. That's a crime. Don't be melodramatic. We're family. Family helps each other. Did you ask for my help? Did you even consider asking?" "We knew what your answer would be," he said dismissively. "You've become very selfish lately, Madison. Very focused on yourself. That's not how we raised you. Respecting other people's property and not committing fraud is exactly how you raised me," I countered. "Or at least, it's what you claimed to value." My father stood, his face flushing. "I've worked hard my entire life to provide for this family. Sometimes that means making difficult decisions. You wouldn't understand. I understand forgery. I understand theft. It's not theft when it's family," he insisted, voice rising. "Everything we've done has been for this family's benefit, including yours." "Return the car now," I said, "and we can avoid what comes next." "Is that a threat?" He looked genuinely shocked, as if the concept of me standing up to him was incomprehensible. "It's a choice. Your choice." He stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head. "You should help your mother in the kitchen. We'll discuss this nonsense after Thanksgiving." Discussion over. As far as he was concerned, I'd been dismissed, just as I had been my entire life when I raised uncomfortable truths. In the kitchen, my mother was mashing sweet potatoes while Tyler leaned against the counter. Noah balanced on his knee. "There's the career woman," Tyler said with a smirk. "Too busy to help with dinner prep?" I ignored him, addressing my mother instead. "Do you know where Dad parked my car?" She didn't look up from her mashing. I think in the Martins' garage across the street. They're in Florida for the holiday, so they'd hidden it from view, knowing I might come looking. That level of premeditation made my blood boil. Oh, Tyler chimed in. Dad mentioned you might be upset about the car thing. Don't worry, we got you covered. He dangled a set of keys. Honda Civic, 2010, only 120,000 miles. Perfect for getting around until we sort out the business expansion. The casualness of it all, the assumption that I would just accept a decade-old Honda as replacement for my brand new Lexus, nearly broke my composure. Where are the keys to my car, Tyler? Dad has them, he said, bouncing Noah on his knee. But seriously, Maddie, you need to chill about this. We're family. This is what family does. By 11:30, other relatives had begun to arrive. Aunt Mildred with her famous green bean casserole, Uncle Pete and his new girlfriend, cousins with children in tow. The house filled with the familiar chaos of a Hayes family Thanksgiving. At noon exactly, my mother called everyone to the table. My father took his place at the head, carving knife and fork at the ready. The turkey, golden brown and massive, steamed in the center of the table. Before we eat, my father announced, "Let's go around and say what we're thankful for." As always, I'll start. He cleared his throat. I'm thankful for this family, for the support we give each other through difficult times, for the understanding that family comes before all else. His eyes fixed on me during that last part, a clear message. The ball was in my court. I could still back down, accept the stolen car and decade-old Honda as a fair trade, preserve the peace. When my turn came, I smiled thinly. I'm thankful for justice, I said, and for consequences. My mother frowned. Tyler rolled his eyes. My father's jaw tightened. After the thankfulness ritual came the prayer. My mother had just bowed her head when the doorbell rang. Who could that be? She muttered, rising to answer it. I checked my watch. 12:10 p.m., right on schedule. From my seat, I could see the front door swing open to reveal Officer Reynolds in full uniform, another officer beside her. Mrs. Hayes, Officer Reynolds said. I'm Officer Reynolds with the Fairview Heights Police Department. We have a warrant to search these premises and recover stolen property. My mother's hand flew to her throat. There must be some mistake. No mistake, ma'am. We have documentation of grand theft, auto, and forgery. Is Robert Hayes present? By now, everyone at the table had turned to stare at the door. My father stood slowly, napkins still tucked into his collar. I'm Robert Hayes, he said, walking toward the door. What is the meaning of this? We're in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner. Sir, we have a warrant for your arrest on charges of forgery and grand theft auto. Officer Reynolds held out the paperwork. You have the right to remain silent. Chaos erupted. My mother began crying. Aunt Mildred gasped dramatically. The children, sensing adult distress, started whimpering. Tyler jumped to his feet. This is ridiculous. It's a family matter. Tyler Hayes? The second officer asked. We have a warrant for your arrest as well, sir. As the officers continued reading the Miranda rights, my father's face transformed from outrage to disbelief to something I'd never seen before. Fear. His eyes found mine across the room, silently pleading. Jessica clutched Noah tighter, her face pale. Tyler? What's happening? Madison is what's happening, my mother snapped, suddenly connecting the dots. She called the police on her own family. On Thanksgiving, all eyes turned to me. I stood slowly, meeting their stares. No, I said clearly. Dad and Tyler called this on themselves when they forged my signature and stole my car. It was a loan, Tyler protested as the officer began handcuffing him. Tell them, Maddie! Tell them you're not pressing charges! I walked to the front door, where Officer Reynolds was now holding the keys to Pearl, recovered from my father's desk. Miss Hayes, we'll need you to verify this is your vehicle, she said professionally. We walked to the Martins' garage across the street, where Pearl sat gleaming under the overhead lights. I ran my hand along her hood. Yes, I confirmed. This is my car. Behind us, the second officer was placing my father and brother in separate patrol cars. My mother stood on the front lawn in her apron, sobbing. Jessica had retreated inside with Noah. The rest of the family watched from windows and doorways, their Thanksgiving dinner forgotten. As I slid into Pearl's driver's seat, I caught my father's eye through the patrol car window. For the first time in my life, I saw him clearly not as the infallible patriarch, but as a man who had made terrible choices and was facing the consequences. I turned the key in the ignition, and Pearl purred to life. It was the sound of freedom. I know that was intense, and I've had to process a lot of emotions since that day. The next part of my story deals with the immediate aftermath and how my family reacted once the initial shock wore off. If you've been in a similar situation where you've had to make a tough choice between keeping the peace and standing up for yourself, I'd love to hear about it. Let me know in the comments if you think I did the right thing or if you would have handled it differently. Now, let's continue. The police station was not where I had expected to spend Thanksgiving afternoon. The hard plastic chair beneath me and the fluorescent lighting above created an atmosphere as far from my mother's dining room as possible. Yet here I was, giving my formal statement while my father and brother were processed in a different part of the building. "We'll need you to go through the timeline once more," Officer Reynolds said, her voice gentle but firm. She'd been surprisingly kind throughout the process, treating me with a respect I hadn't felt from my own family in years. I recounted the events again. The email from the dealership, the discovery of the forgery, the evidence gathered by Marcus, the refusal of my family to return the car or acknowledge the seriousness of their actions. "And you wish to press charges?" she confirmed, pen poised above her notepad. For a brief moment, doubt flickered. I thought of my father's face as he was led to the patrol car, of Tyler being handcuffed in front of his wife and child. The image of my mother sobbing on the front lawn in her holiday apron flashed through my mind. Then I remembered their dismissal of my feelings, their entitlement to my property, their absolute certainty that I would fold under pressure as I always had. "Yes," I said firmly. "I wish to press charges." I was in the process of signing my statement when my mother burst into the waiting area. Her makeup streaked down her face. "Madison Elizabeth Hayes," she hissed, using my full name as she had when I was in trouble as a child. "What have you done?" Officer Reynolds stepped between us. "Ma'am, please keep your voice down. They're booking my husband and son like common criminals." My mother's voice rose despite the warning. "On Thanksgiving? Is this the thanks we get for raising you? For giving you everything?" "Mrs. Hayes," Officer Reynolds began, but I touched her arm. "It's okay. I'll handle this." My mother continued as if I hadn't spoken. "Jessica is at home with the baby, hysterical. Thanksgiving is ruined. The entire family is in shock. How could you do this to us?" "I didn't do this," I said quietly. "Dad and Tyler did this when they forged my signature and stole my car." "It's a car, Madison. A material object. We're talking about your family." "Exactly. My family stole from me. My family committed fraud in my name. My family ignored my repeated requests to return my property. We were going to give it back. Tyler found you a perfectly good replacement. A 10-year-old Honda with 120,000 miles is not a replacement for my new Lexus," I countered. "And that's not even the point. The point is that they took something that belonged to me without asking, then expected me to just accept it." "Family helps family," my mother insisted, repeating the mantra I'd heard all my life. "Help is freely given, not taken by force or deception." My mother stared at me as if seeing a stranger. Perhaps she was. The Madison she knew would have capitulated by now, eager to restore peace at any cost. "They could go to jail," she said, her voice breaking. "Your own father and brother. Is that what you want?" "What I wanted was my car back without police involvement," I replied. "I gave them multiple chances to return it." "Drop the charges," she pleaded. "For me. For the family." Before I could respond, Officer Reynolds intervened. "Mrs. Hayes, your husband and son are being processed for documented fraud and grand theft auto. Miss Hayes has given her statement and chosen to press charges. This is now a legal matter." My mother turned on her. "This is a family matter. You had no right to barge into our home on Thanksgiving." "We had a warrant, ma'am." As Officer Reynolds gently guided my mother toward the waiting area, explaining the booking process and bail options, my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Please tell me you're not really going through with this. Tyler says there's been a misunderstanding. He says if you drop the charges, they'll give the car back immediately." I stared at the message, noting how even now, they were trying to negotiate rather than take responsibility. If I dropped the charges, they'd return my car as if it had ever been theirs to take or return. I texted back, "It's not a misunderstanding. They forged my signature and stole my car. They had multiple chances to return it before it came to this." Jessica's response was immediate. "Noah needs his father, not jail time on his record. Please, Madison." I didn't know anything about this. That gave me pause. I hadn't considered that Jessica might be innocent in all this. Tyler was perfectly capable of keeping her in the dark, spinning tales about arrangements with his sister. I was contemplating my response when Officer Reynolds returned. "Your father and brother are being processed now," she informed me. "Based on the value of the vehicle and the nature of the forgery, they're being charged with Class 4 felonies. However, since neither has a prior record, they'll likely be released on bail today." "What happens next?" I asked. "There will be an arraignment where they enter their pleas. Given the evidence, their lawyers will probably advise them to make a deal. But that's down the road. For now, your car has been processed as evidence and cleared for release to you." She handed me Pearl's keys, and the weight of them in my palm felt significant. These weren't just car keys. They were a symbol of my refusal to be taken advantage of anymore. As I drove home in Pearl, the seats still adjusted to my height, the radio still on my preferred station, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief that my car was back, pride that I had stood my ground, but also a hollow sadness for what had been irreparably broken today. My phone didn't stop buzzing with texts and calls for the rest of the day. Extended family members expressing shock and disapproval, friends who had heard rumors asking for details, Kayla offering to come over with wine and support. I ignored most of them, responding only to Kayla with a brief, "I'm okay. Just need some time alone." Around 8 p.m., there was a knock at my apartment door. I peered through the peephole to see Jessica, alone, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. I hesitated, then opened the door. "They made bail," she said without preamble. "They're home now." I nodded, unsure how to respond. "Can I come in, please?" I stepped aside, and she entered, glancing around my apartment as if seeing it for the first time. Perhaps she was. Jessica had always been Tyler's wife, part of a package deal at family gatherings. We'd never had a one-on-one conversation of substance. "I didn't know," she said, perching on the edge of my couch. "About the car, about forging your signature. Tyler told me you had agreed to help with a loan, and the car was just collateral. And you believed that after I explicitly refused to loan them money last Thanksgiving?" She looked down at her hands. "Tyler can be convincing. He said you had a change of heart, that you were finally being a team player." I should have questioned it more, especially when they were so secretive about the details. I sank into the armchair across from her. "Where's Noah?" "With my mother." I couldn't. I didn't want him to see Tyler like this. Angry, scared. "I'm sorry you and Noah are caught in the middle of this," I said, and meant it. "But I'm not sorry I reported the theft. They're saying you've destroyed the family, that you chose a car over your own blood. They stole from me, Jessica. They committed fraud in my name, after years of taking advantage of me financially. What would you have done?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know," she admitted finally. "Family is complicated." "Yes, it is. Tyler's business is failing," she said suddenly. "Has been for months. I didn't know how bad it was until today. The loan they got using your car was to cover payroll for his employees. He's been hiding bills, maxing out credit cards. We might lose the house." The revelation didn't surprise me as much as it should have. Tyler had always lived beyond his means, confident that someone, usually me, would bail him out when things got tight. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. "But theft and fraud weren't the answer." "No," she agreed quietly. "They weren't." We sat in silence for a few minutes before she stood to leave. At the door, she paused. "What happens now?" she asked, the question encompassing far more than the legal proceedings. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "That depends on them as much as me." After she left, I checked my phone to find a barrage of texts from my mother, each more desperate than the last. "Your father can't have a criminal record at his age. It will destroy him. Think about what this will do to Tyler's business reputation. How can we face the neighbors after police cars at our home on Thanksgiving? Is this car worth tearing your family apart?" The last one hit hardest. because it so perfectly encapsulated what my family still didn't understand. This wasn't about the car. It never had been. It was about respect, boundaries, and consequences, concepts that seemed foreign to the Hayes family dynamic. I silenced my phone and went to bed early, emotionally drained from the day. But sleep eluded me. I kept seeing my father's face as the handcuffs clicked shut, my mother sobbing on the lawn, Tyler's look of disbelief as the reality of his actions finally caught up with him. Had I gone too far? Was a car worth this family schism, no matter how justified? Around midnight, my doorbell rang. Wary after the emotional day, I checked the peephole before opening the door. It was Jessica again, this time with tears streaming down her face and a manila folder clutched in her hand. "I found these in Tyler's home office," she said, thrusting the folder at me. "I thought you should know what you're really dealing with." Inside were bank statements, loan applications, and emails evidence of a pattern of financial deception that went far beyond my car. Tyler had apparently been using my personal information for years, opening credit cards in my name, taking out small loans, even listing me as a guarantor on business contracts, all without my knowledge or consent. "There's more," Jessica said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The money you loaned him last year for business expansion? He used it at casinos. He has a gambling problem, just like your dad." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My brother hadn't just stolen my car. He'd been stealing my identity for years. And he'd inherited more than charm from our father. He'd inherited the same addiction that had caused so much of our family's financial instability. "Does my mother know?" I asked. Jessica shook her head. "I don't think so, but your father might. Some of these documents have his signature too." As Jessica left, promising to be in touch about what she decided to do next in her own marriage, I sat alone with the evidence of years of betrayal spread out on my coffee table. This was so much bigger than a stolen Lexus. This was systematic deception by the people I should have been able to trust most in the world. Sleep was impossible now. I made coffee and began organizing the documents, creating a timeline of fraud that stretched back at least 3 years. With each piece of evidence I sorted, my resolve strengthened. This wasn't just about standing up for myself anymore. This was about stopping a pattern of behavior that was hurting everyone involved, including, ultimately, Tyler and my father themselves. By dawn, I had 2 neat piles. One for Rachel, my lawyer, and one for Officer Reynolds. Whatever came next, there would be no going back to the way things were. For better or worse, Thanksgiving had changed everything. The Fairview County Courthouse was an imposing structure of red brick and white columns. I'd driven past it hundreds of times, but had never expected to enter its doors as a victim of identity theft perpetrated by my own family. It was 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, and today was the arraignment. Rachel Watson sat beside me in the gallery, her presence reassuring as we waited for my father and brother to be called. "Remember," Rachel whispered, "they'll almost certainly plead not guilty today. It's standard procedure. The real negotiations happen later." I nodded, watching as other cases were processed with assembly line efficiency. Across the aisle, my mother sat rigid and alone. She hadn't acknowledged my presence when she entered, though her eyes had flicked briefly in my direction. "Commonwealth versus Robert Hayes and Tyler Hayes," the clerk announced. My father and brother were let in, both wearing suits that seemed slightly too large, borrowed, perhaps, or recently purchased in haste. Neither was handcuffed, but there was a deputy standing close behind them. They looked smaller somehow, diminished by the formal setting and the gravity of the charges against them. Their attorney, Maxwell Brennan, was exactly what I'd expected. Expensive suit, confident stride, the kind of lawyer who typically represented white-collar criminals and affluent drunk drivers. He'd probably cost more than my father could afford, which made me wonder who was financing this defense. As predicted, both men pleaded not guilty to all charges. Bail conditions were continued, and a date was set for the preliminary hearing. The entire proceeding took less than 10 minutes. As they were let out, Tyler turned and caught my eye. The look he gave me wasn't anger or betrayal, as I'd expected. It was something I'd rarely seen from my charismatic, confident brother: fear. Outside the courthouse, my mother intercepted me as I walked to my car. "Are you satisfied?" she demanded, her voice low but intense. Your father can barely sleep. Tyler's wife is talking about separation. Is this the revenge you wanted? This isn't revenge, Mom. It's consequences. It's family destruction is what it is, she snapped. Pastor Mike says, I don't care what Pastor Mike says, I interrupted. Dad and Tyler committed crimes. Multiple crimes, over years. Did you know about the credit cards? The loans? My mother's expression faltered for just a moment, enough to tell me she hadn't known the full extent of their deception. Whatever financial irregularities might have occurred, they were for the good of the family. She recovered quickly. Your father and brother were protecting us, providing for us. By stealing my identity? By forging my name? That's not protection, Mom. That's exploitation. You've always been so dramatic, Madison. So black and white about everything. Rachel touched my arm, a gentle reminder of our agreed strategy. Minimal engagement, no arguments. I have to go, Mom. My lawyer can communicate with Dad's lawyer about any settlement discussions. Settlement? My mother looked bewildered. You're talking like this is some kind of business transaction. This is your family. Yes, I agreed. And families should treat each other with respect and honesty. As Rachel and I walked away, my mother called after us. Pastor Mike is organizing a family intervention on Sunday. The whole congregation is praying for your hardened heart. Rachel raised an eyebrow once we were out of earshot. Family intervention? My mother's answer to everything is church-sanctioned guilt, I explained. I stopped going to their church years ago, but she still thinks Pastor Mike has some kind of authority over me. Well, legally, he has none, Rachel assured me. And speaking of legal matters, I've received some interesting information from the financial investigation. Over lunch at a cafe near the courthouse, Rachel showed me the preliminary findings. The picture was worse than I'd imagined. My father and Tyler had been engaging in various forms of financial fraud for years, well beyond what Jessica had discovered. They'd used my information for some schemes, but they'd also falsified business records, misrepresented assets to lenders, and potentially committed tax fraud. The prosecutor is very interested in this information, Rachel said. It changes the scope of the case significantly. What does that mean for potential consequences? I asked, feeling a strange mix of vindication and dread. It means they're facing more serious charges than just the car theft and forgery. Given their lack of prior criminal records, they'll likely be offered plea deals, but those deals could still include some jail time, particularly for your brother, who appears to be the primary instigator of the more sophisticated schemes. Jail time. The words hung in the air between us. Was I prepared to send my father and brother to jail? Could I live with myself if I did? Could I live with myself if I didn't? You look conflicted, Rachel observed. I am, I admitted. I want them to face consequences. But jail. Consider this, Rachel said gently. If you hadn't discovered the car theft, how long would this pattern have continued? How much more financial damage would they have done to you and to others? She had a point. Without intervention, there was no reason to believe Tyler and my father would have stopped. They might have continued until they'd completely ruined my credit, or worse. The next few weeks brought a flurry of legal developments. The prosecutor filed additional charges based on the financial investigation. My father's attorney reached out about a potential plea agreement. Tyler hired a separate lawyer, suggesting a rift in their united front. Meanwhile, the extended family chose sides. My father's siblings rallied around him, sending me emails and texts about forgiveness and family loyalty. My mother's sister, Aunt Clara, surprised me by calling to express her support. Your mother is my sister and I love her, Aunt Clara said, but she's been enabling your father's behavior for decades. It was bound to come to a head eventually. At work, I'd expected awkwardness or judgment, but instead found unexpected support. My boss, Vivian, called me into her office after the story made the local paper. Daughter presses charges against family for car theft, a headline that made me cringe despite its accuracy. I want you to know this doesn't affect your standing here at all, Vivian assured me. In fact, I admire your courage. It can't have been easy. It wasn't, I admitted. It still isn't. I had to report my brother for embezzlement 15 years ago, she confided, surprising me. He was stealing from our parents' business. The family was divided for years, But eventually, most of them came to understand I'd done the right thing. And more importantly, my brother got the help he needed. He's been clean and running his own legitimate business for a decade now. Her words gave me hope that perhaps, someday, something positive might emerge from this painful process. 3 weeks after the arraignment, Jessica called to ask if we could meet. We agreed on a quiet cafe near my apartment. She looked different, more confident, somehow, despite the dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. "I've filed for separation," she announced without preamble. "I've taken Noah and moved in with my sister temporarily." "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. "Don't be. It was long overdue." Tyler's behavior since the arrest has been revealing. Angry 1 minute, self-pitying the next. He refuses to take responsibility for anything. That sounds like Tyler. "The thing is," Jessica continued, "I need your help. I want to file for divorce, but I'm worried about what Tyler might do financially. Given what he did to you, I'm concerned he might try to hide assets or run up debt in my name. What can I do? Your private investigator, Marcus? Could you put me in touch with him? I need someone who can document everything before I file officially." I agreed immediately, relieved that Jessica was taking steps to protect herself and Noah. Later that week, another unexpected development occurred. Tyler's business partner, a man named Craig, who I'd met only once at a company holiday party, contacted me. "I think you should know," Craig said when we met at a downtown coffee shop, "that Tyler has been telling everyone you're mentally unstable and making up these allegations." "That's not surprising," I sighed. "But the evidence speaks for itself." "Yes, about that evidence." Craig looked uncomfortable. "Some of the business records the investigation uncovered? I was complicit in those. Tyler convinced me it was just creative accounting, but I knew it wasn't right." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm going to come clean to the authorities, and because I wanted to apologize to you personally. I suspected Tyler was using your information improperly, but I didn't say anything." His confession added another layer of complexity to an already complicated situation. How many people had been drawn into my father and brother's web of deception? How far did the damage extend? The answer came partly through an unexpected source. Pastor Mike, despite my mother's insistence that he was firmly on their side, reached out to me directly. "Your mother doesn't know I'm calling you," he began awkwardly. "But I felt it was important to speak with you directly, rather than hear everything secondhand." I braced myself for a lecture on forgiveness and family duty. "Several members of our congregation have come forward after hearing about your situation," he continued. "It seems your brother approached them about investment opportunities over the past few years. Most lost money. One elderly couple invested their entire retirement savings." My stomach dropped. "Are they taking legal action?" "They're considering it," Pastor Mike said. I wanted to ask, is there a way to make this right that doesn't involve more court cases? More public exposure? It was the first time anyone from my parents' social circle had acknowledged that my father and brother might actually be in the wrong. It was also the first suggestion of a resolution that didn't involve me simply dropping all charges and pretending nothing had happened. "I'm open to discussions," I said cautiously. "But any resolution has to include full accountability and restitution." "I understand," Pastor Mike replied. "And for what it's worth, while your mother is still processing all this, I believe you did the right thing by stopping behavior that was hurting many people, including, ultimately, your father and brother themselves." His words echoed what Dr. Chen had been telling me in our weekly sessions, that enabling harmful behavior wasn't truly loving, and that sometimes the kindest thing you could do for someone was to let them face the consequences of their actions. As January approached, bringing with it the preliminary hearing that would determine if there was enough evidence to proceed to trial, I found myself at a crossroads. The prosecutor, impressed by the mounting evidence and victim statements from Tyler's business associates and church members, was pushing for significant penalties. My father's attorney was desperately trying to negotiate a plea deal that would keep him out of jail given his age and health concerns. Tyler's new lawyer was suggesting that he had been under duress or suffering from gambling addiction-related diminished capacity. The case had grown far beyond a stolen Lexus. It had exposed years of financial manipulation and fraud that had affected dozens of people. I sat in Dr. Chen's office, turning over the options in my mind. "What do you want the outcome to be?" Dr. Chen asked, as she often did when I was struggling with a decision. "I want them to understand what they did wrong," I said slowly. "I want them to make amends to everyone they've hurt. I want them to get help for their gambling addictions. I want my mother to stop enabling harmful behavior. I want my family to be healthy, even if that means we're never as close as my mother pretends we are." Those are goals related to their behavior and choices, Dr. Chen pointed out. "What about your goals for yourself in this situation?" I considered the question. I want to stand firm without being vindictive. I want to show compassion without being a doormat. I want to find a way forward that honors the truth but leaves room for healing. Dr. Chen smiled. "Those sound like worthwhile goals to me." With those goals in mind, I contacted Rachel and asked her to arrange a meeting with the prosecutor, my father's attorney, and Tyler's attorney. It was time to discuss a resolution that might achieve justice while leaving the door open for something my family had never truly practiced: genuine accountability and amends. The new year brought with it a tentative resolution to the legal proceedings. After extensive negotiations, both my father and Tyler agreed to plea deals that reflected the seriousness of their actions while acknowledging their lack of prior criminal records. My father pleaded guilty to forgery and identity theft, receiving 2 years of probation, community service at a financial literacy center for seniors, and mandatory counseling for gambling addiction. He also agreed to make full restitution to me and to the other victims identified in the investigation. Tyler's plea deal was more severe, given his role as the primary instigator of the more sophisticated fraud schemes. He received a suspended sentence of 18 months, 5 years of probation, extensive community service, and mandatory participation in both gambling addiction treatment and financial counseling. Like my father, he was required to make full restitution to all victims. Both men would have felony records, though there were provisions for potential expungement after completion of all terms and a significant waiting period. The resolution wasn't perfect. No legal solution to such a personal betrayal could be, but it addressed the primary goals I'd identified with Dr. Chen: accountability, amends, and help for the underlying issues that had contributed to their behavior. Not everyone was satisfied, of course. My mother still viewed me as the villain of the story, the ungrateful daughter who had chosen legality over loyalty. She attended the sentencing hearing but sat as far from me as possible, refusing to meet my eyes. Tyler oscillated between resentment and performative remorse, depending on his audience. In court, he presented himself as a penitent son and brother who had made terrible mistakes due to the pressures of providing for his family and his untreated addiction. In private communications to extended family, he continued to paint me as vindictive and materialistic. My father was harder to read. During the sentencing, he had stood with his shoulders slumped, looking every day of his 65 years and then some. When given the opportunity to address the court, he had spoken briefly. "I failed as a father and as a man of integrity," he'd said, his voice cracking. "I deserve whatever punishment the court deems appropriate." Was it genuine remorse, or simply resignation in the face of overwhelming evidence? I couldn't be sure. As winter melted into spring, I focused on rebuilding my own life. The legal proceedings had taken a toll on my mental health, my work performance, and my social connections. With the case resolved, at least officially, I could begin to heal. The first step was moving. My apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt vulnerable. Tyler knew where I lived, and though his probation conditions prohibited contact with me without my explicit consent, I couldn't shake the uneasiness I felt each time I entered the building. With Kayla's help, I found a new apartment in a secured building across town. It had a balcony where I could place potted herbs and flowers, a luxury my previous apartment had lacked. The moving process was cathartic, a physical representation of the emotional changes I was undergoing. "New place, new start," Kayla declared as we unpacked kitchen boxes. "Though I notice you brought all your old mugs. Some things are worth keeping," I replied, carefully arranging my collection on the open shelving. Work became another area of focus. I'd maintained my performance during the worst of the legal battle, but I hadn't been able to give my projects the creative energy they deserved. Now, with that mental space freed, I threw myself into a major client presentation that had been simmering on the back burner. "This is exceptional work, Madison," Vivian said after I'd presented my analysis to the executive team. "In fact, I'd like you to consider taking on more leadership in the department. There's a senior project manager position opening up next month." The vote of confidence was exactly what I needed. The promotion would come with more responsibility, but also more autonomy and a significant salary increase. After years of draining my savings to help my family, the financial security was particularly welcome. My personal life, too, began to blossom in unexpected ways. Through a kickboxing class Kayla had dragged me to, great for stress relief, trust me, I met Anna, a kindergarten teacher with a sharp wit and warm smile. What began as post-class coffee evolved into dinners, movies, and eventually tentative discussions about where our relationship might be heading. "I should warn you," I told her on our third date, "my family situation is complicated." "Whose isn't?" she'd replied with a laugh. "My mother still sends my college boyfriend Christmas cards, and my dad collects taxidermy ferrets. Complicated is normal." When I'd eventually shared the full story, Anna had listened without judgment. "It takes courage to stand up to the people who raised you," she'd said afterward. "To recognize that love doesn't mean accepting mistreatment." Her understanding helped me navigate the conflicting emotions that still surfaced. Guilt over the consequences my father and brother faced, anger at their betrayal, sadness for what our family could have been with healthier boundaries and genuine respect. Dr. Chen, too, continued to provide invaluable guidance as I processed these feelings. "Family dynamics are established early and reinforced over decades," she explained during one session. "It's natural to feel conflicted about disrupting those patterns, even when they're harmful. Part of you still yearns for the approval and acceptance you were conditioned to seek." "Will that ever go away?" I asked. "It may not go away entirely," she acknowledged, "but it can diminish over time as you build a life based on authentic relationships and mutual respect. As you create your own definition of family, that definition was evolving in unexpected ways." Jessica, who had moved forward with divorce proceedings against Tyler, had become something of a friend. We met regularly for coffee, her son Noah toddling between our chairs or napping in his stroller. "The divorce should be finalized next month," she told me during one such meeting in late April. "Tyler's fighting the custody arrangement, but given everything, his lawyer has advised him that the current visitation schedule is the best he can hope for." "How are you holding up?" I asked, watching as she automatically wiped Noah's sticky fingers with a practiced motion. "Better than I expected," she admitted. "My job at the dental office is going well. Noah loves his new daycare, and I'm learning who I am outside of Tyler's wife, which is illuminating." "I'm glad," I said sincerely. Despite the circumstances that had brought us closer, I genuinely enjoyed Jessica's company and admired her resilience. "Your mom called me yesterday," Jessica mentioned casually. "She wanted to know if I'd help convince you to attend your dad's birthday dinner next week. Apparently, the whole family will be there, and your absence would be noted and painful." I sighed. My mother had been reaching out with increasing frequency, always with some family obligation I was apparently shirking. Easter dinner, my cousin's baby shower, my uncle's retirement party, each invitation delivered with a clear subtext. "It's time to put this unpleasantness behind us and pretend we're a normal family again." "What did you tell her?" I asked Jessica. "That I had no influence over your decisions, nor should I, and that maybe, instead of trying to force family gatherings, she should consider addressing the actual issues that led to this situation." "I'm sure that went over well," I said wryly. Jessica grimaced. "About as well as you'd expect." She said I've been poisoned against the family, too. The interaction was typical of my mother's approach since the legal proceedings had concluded. She wanted desperately to return to the status quo, without acknowledging that the status quo had been built on exploitation and boundary violations. In her mind, now that the courts had issued their punishment, everyone should move on, preferably by pretending nothing had happened. My father's approach was different, and, in some ways, more difficult to navigate. He had begun attending his court-mandated gambling addiction treatment and, according to my mother's updates, which I hadn't requested but received nonetheless, was taking it very seriously. In early May, I received a handwritten letter from him, the first direct communication since the sentencing. "Dear Madison, It began in my father's precise engineer's handwriting. I am writing this letter as part of my treatment program's amends process. But please know that these words come from my heart, not just as an obligation. The letter continued for 3 pages, acknowledging in specific terms the harm he had caused not just with the car incident, but throughout my childhood and adult life. He detailed the patterns of financial exploitation, the emotional manipulation, the unfair favoritism shown to Tyler. He made no excuses, though he did provide context about his own father's gambling addiction and the dysfunctional family dynamics he'd grown up with. None of this justifies my actions, he wrote toward the end. I am solely responsible for the choices I made and the harm I caused. I don't expect forgiveness, nor do I deserve it. But I want you to know that I am committed to changing, not just because the court requires it, but because I have finally recognized how much damage my behavior has done to you, to your brother, to our entire family. He closed by stating that he would respect whatever boundaries I wished to maintain and would make no demands on my time or attention. He included his personal email address, not the family account my mother monitored should I ever wish to respond. The letter sat on my kitchen counter for days as I processed my feelings about it. Was it genuine? Was he truly changing? Or was this another manipulation tactic? And even if it was genuine, did it change how I felt about maintaining distance from my family? I shared these questions with Dr. Chen, who offered a perspective I hadn't considered. Genuine amends and true forgiveness don't necessarily mean reconciliation, she pointed out. You can acknowledge someone's efforts to change while still maintaining the boundaries you need for your own well-being. So I don't have to decide right now whether to let him back into my life? I asked. Exactly. You can take time to observe his actions, not just his words. Sustainable change happens slowly, over time. There's no rush to make a final determination about your relationship. Armed with this understanding, I eventually sent my father a brief email acknowledging receipt of his letter and expressing appreciation for his honesty. I made no promises about future contact, but left the door open for continued written communication. Tyler, meanwhile, had made no similar efforts at amends. According to Jessica, he was fulfilling the technical requirements of his plea agreement, but still maintained that he was the victim of my overreaction and vindictiveness. He had moved in with a friend from his gambling circle and was working at a car dealership, an irony not lost on anyone. As spring bloomed into early summer, I found myself approaching the anniversary of the car purchase that had set everything in motion. Pearls still gleamed in the parking garage beneath my new apartment building, a daily reminder of both the betrayal and my subsequent stand against it. One sunny Saturday in June, I decided to take her for a long drive along the coast, something I'd planned to do when I first bought her, but had never gotten around to. Anna joined me, bringing a picnic basket and her infectious laugh. As we drove with the windows down, the salt air tousling our hair, I found myself reflecting on the tumultuous year behind me. Penny, for your thoughts, Anna asked, noticing my contemplative mood. I was just thinking about how different my life is now compared to a year ago, I replied. How much has changed? For the better? I considered the question seriously. The family I'd grown up with was fractured, perhaps irreparably. My father was struggling to rebuild his life at an age when most people were thinking about retirement. My brother was bitter and unrepentant. My mother was stuck in denial, and yet, I was more at peace than I could remember being in years. I had set boundaries and held firm to them, despite enormous pressure. I had discovered my own strength and resilience. I had built relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation and manipulation. Yes, I said finally, for the better. Anna smiled and squeezed my hand. I'm glad. You deserve good things, Madison. As we spread our picnic on a bluff overlooking the ocean, I allowed myself to fully inhabit the moment. The taste of fresh strawberries, the sound of waves crashing below, the warmth of genuine affection from someone who saw me clearly and valued me as I was. This, I realized, was what family should feel like: safe, nurturing, authentic. I might not have been born into such a family, but I was creating one now, piece by piece, relationship by relationship, and that was something worth celebrating. 1 year after the Thanksgiving that changed everything, I stood in my kitchen preparing a sweet potato casserole. The rich aroma of brown sugar and cinnamon filled my apartment, mingling with the scent of the turkey Anna was basting in the oven. "Are you sure I shouldn't have made the canned cranberry sauce?" I called to her, only half joking. Apparently no one ate my fancy stuff last year. Anna appeared in the doorway, dish towel over her shoulder. "Trust me, your cranberry orange relish is divine. Anyone who prefers the canned version has questionable taste." I smiled, grateful for her presence and the lightness she brought to what could have been a difficult day. This would be my first Thanksgiving hosting, with a guest list that reflected the changes in my life over the past year. Kayla and her boyfriend Mark, Jessica and Noah, my Aunt Clara, the only family member who had consistently supported me, and Anna's brother Ryan, who was in town for the holiday. The doorbell rang, and Anna went to answer it while I put the finishing touches on the casserole. Voices drifted in from the living room, Jessica's soft greeting, Noah's excited babbling, Kayla's distinctive laugh. As I joined them, balancing a tray of appetizers, I was struck by the warmth in the room. These people had chosen to be here, chosen to create something meaningful together. There was no undercurrent of tension, no walking on eggshells, no pretense of perfection. "Madison!" Jessica exclaimed, giving me a one-armed hug while balancing Noah on her hip. "Everything smells amazing." "I'm just following my grandmother's recipes," I said. "With some updates," Anna suggested. "Speaking of updates," Jessica said, lowering her voice, "I thought you should know that Tyler moved to Nevada last week. He said there are better opportunities there, but I think he's trying to escape the consequences of everything that happened here." I nodded, absorbing the information. Tyler's departure wasn't surprising, given his resistance to taking responsibility for his actions. Despite completing the required treatment programs, he'd shown little evidence of genuine change. "How are you feeling about that?" I asked. Knowing the divorce had been finalized months ago, but aware that emotional entanglements rarely ended so neatly. "Relieved, honestly," Jessica admitted. "The distance will make the co-parenting logistics more complicated, but having him physically removed from our daily lives, it's like I can finally breathe fully again." I understood that feeling all too well. The remainder of the guests arrived in quick succession. Aunt Clara brought her famous pecan pie and a warm hug. "Your mother sends her regards," she murmured in my ear, a white lie we both recognized but appreciated for its intent. My relationship with my mother remained strained. She had never fully acknowledged the legitimacy of my feelings or actions, preferring to cast herself as the long-suffering matriarch whose family had been torn apart by external forces rather than internal dysfunction. We spoke occasionally, brief, surface-level conversations that carefully avoided any topics of substance. My father, on the other hand, had continued his tentative outreach through letters and emails. The most recent had come just last week, updating me on his progress in treatment, 1 year sober from gambling, his volunteer work at the Senior Financial Literacy Center, now continuing beyond his court-mandated hours, and his decision to begin individual therapy to address the deeper issues that had contributed to his addictive and deceptive behaviors. He had not asked to attend today's dinner, respecting the boundaries I'd established, but he had wished me a peaceful holiday and expressed hope that someday, when I was ready, we might meet in person again. I was not yet ready, but for the first time, I could imagine a future where I might be. As we gathered around my dining table, a recent purchase that Anna and I had selected together, solid maple that felt like it could support many years of gatherings to come. I looked at the faces of these people who had walked with me through the darkest year of my life and emerged alongside me into the light. "Before we eat," I said, raising my glass, "I'd like to propose a toast to chosen family, to boundaries that protect rather than walls that divide, and to the courage to create the life you want rather than accepting the one you were given." "Here, here," Kayla responded immediately, clinking her glass against mine. The others joined in, a chorus of glasses touching amid smiles and nods of agreement. As we passed dishes, family style around the table, conversation flowed naturally. Noah's latest developmental milestones, Ryan's new job, Aunt Clara's garden club drama. There were no pointed comments disguised as concerns, no passive-aggressive sighs, no tension thrumming beneath the surface. Later, after dessert had been served and Noah had fallen asleep on Jessica's lap, Aunt Clara pulled me aside. "I saw your father yesterday," she said quietly. At the supermarket, he looked better, more present. That's good, I replied, feeling a complex mix of emotions at the mention of him. He asked about you. Not in a prying way, she added hastily. He just wanted to know if you were well. What did you tell him? I told him you were flourishing, Aunt Clara said with a small smile. That you seemed happier and more at peace than I'd seen you in years. Thank you, I said, surprising myself by adding, that's true. After our guests had departed and Anna and I were tackling the mountain of dishes, she asked the question I'd been expecting all day. How are you feeling? About everything? I considered before answering, wanting to be honest both with her and with myself. Grateful, I finally said. For you, for our friends, for this new version of my life. There's still sadness for what happened, for what my family could have been, but wasn't. But mostly, I'm at peace with the decisions I made and the boundaries I set. Anna nodded, passing me a plate to dry. You know what I admire most about you? Your courage to redefine family on your own terms. To recognize that love without respect isn't really love at all. Her words echoed what I'd been discovering throughout this journey. That true family, whether bound by blood or by choice, was built on mutual respect, honesty, and support. That loyalty meant holding each other accountable rather than enabling harmful behavior. That love sometimes meant setting boundaries, even when those boundaries were painful. The next morning, I drove to the courthouse for the final hearing related to my father and brother's cases. Both had completed their initial requirements, and this was a standard progress review. I hadn't planned to attend, but something had compelled me to witness this milestone. I slipped into the back of the courtroom just as my father's case was being called. He stood with his attorney, answering the judge's questions about his compliance with the terms of his probation and treatment programs. He looked older, but somehow more substantial, as if he was finally fully inhabiting his own life, rather than constructing an elaborate facade. When asked if he wished to make a statement, my father nodded. I want to express my gratitude for the opportunity to make amends and to change, he said, his voice steady. A year ago, I was living a life built on deception, deceiving others, and, perhaps most harmfully, deceiving myself. The consequences of my actions have been painful but necessary. They forced me to confront truths I had been avoiding for decades. He continued, acknowledging the harm he had caused to various parties, though he did not specifically name me. I cannot undo the past, he concluded, but I am committed to living with integrity going forward, regardless of who is watching or what external pressures exist. As he turned to return to his seat, his eyes met mine across the courtroom. For a brief moment, we simply looked at each other, father and daughter, two people with a complicated shared history and an uncertain future relationship. I gave a small nod of acknowledgement. He returned it, the ghost of a smile touching his lips before he sat down. I didn't stay for Tyler's review. Some bridges would take longer to rebuild, if they ever could be. Some might remain permanently broken, and that was okay too. Outside the courthouse, I paused on the steps, breathing in the crisp, late November air. My phone buzzed with a text from Anna. Thinking of you today. Proud of you always. I smiled and slid into Pearl's driver's seat. The car that had been at the center of so much conflict now represented something different to me. Not just a material possession, but a symbol of my journey from doormat to self-respect, from silent suffering to courageous confrontation. As I drove home, I reflected on the past year and all its painful lessons. I had lost the family I was born into, at least in its previous configuration, but I had gained something more valuable, the knowledge that I deserved respect, the courage to demand it, and the wisdom to build a life filled with people who gave it freely. Pearl's engine hummed smoothly beneath me as I navigated familiar streets toward the home I had created for myself. It wasn't the ending I would have chosen a year ago, but it was the beginning I needed, a beginning built on truth, boundaries, and genuine connection. And that made it a journey worth taking. If my story has resonated with you in any way, I would be incredibly grateful if you'd take a moment to like this video and consider subscribing to my channel. Your support means the world to me as I continue sharing these difficult life experiences. Have you ever had to make a tough choice between keeping the peace and standing up for yourself? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Remember, sometimes the most painful journeys lead to the most important growth. Thank you so much for listening to my story today, and I hope the lessons I learned about family, boundaries, and self-respect might help someone else who's facing similar challenges. Until next time, take care of yourselves and remember, real family respects you, whether they're related by blood or by choice.